Hello everyone, welcome to this series where we are going to cover a selected group of exercises from chapter 5 for BUS 325 investment course. In this video we're going to go over exercise number 5, which says suppose your expectations regarding the stock market are as follows. And then the question is providing you with a table that shows three assumed scenarios in case of an economy boom, normal growth, or a recession. And for each scenario, we have a probability right here and a corresponding holding period return for each scenario. What is required? What's required is to compute the mean and standard deviation of the holding period return on the stocks. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to calculate the holding period return. And to calculate the holding period return, we are going to use the following formula. It's going to be the expected return, which is going to be the mean of the three scenarios, which is equal to sigma each probability multiplied by the expected return on that probability. Okay? So that is going to be the first probability we have here, which is 30% for an economic boom, right? So we're going to say 0.3 multiplied by 0.44. So 30% chance of achieving a return of 44%. And then we close the brackets, we add the second scenario, and that is going to be 0.4 multiplied by 0.14. So a 40% chance of achieving a 14% return. Then we add the third scenario, 0.3 multiplied by minus 0.16. Okay. And then all we need to do is just run the numbers in a calculator. So the first bracket, 0.3 multiplied by 0.44. That's going to give us just change my calculator to a decimal format. 0.132 plus 0.4 multiplied by 0.14 0.056 plus 0.3 multiplied by minus 0.16. That's going to be minus 0.048. And finally, we're just going to figure out the total. So 0.132 plus 0.056 minus 0.048. And that's going to give us 0.14, which is 14%. Okay, so that is the first part of the question completed, which is to find out the mean. We move on to the second requirement, which is to find the standard deviation. Now, in order to figure out the standard deviation, we first need to calculate the variance. And the way we do this, variance of R, which is equal to sigma squared, which is going to be calculated by the sum of the probabilities multiplied by the return on each scenario minus the mean we just calculated in the first part, squared. Okay. Don't worry much about the formula. You just need to understand it, and then you'll see that the calculation is intuitive and simple. So the first scenario had a probability of 30%, 0.3. So that's going to be 0.3 multiplied by the holding period return in a bracket minus the mean we just calculated right here. Okay, so that will be minus multiplied by 0.44 minus 0.14 squared. Okay, then we move on to the second scenario, which had a probability of 0.4, and multiply that by 0.14, which is the holding period return for that scenario, 14%, minus 0.14, which is our expected return. Okay, to the power of 2, we close the brackets. Plus, sorry, I'm going to have to move on to the rest of the calculation to the following line. We open the last brackets. The recession scenario had a probability of 0.3. So that's going to be 0.3 multiplied by, we open a bracket. The holding period return for the last scenario was minus 16%. So that's going to be minus 0.16 minus 0.14, which is our expected return, to the power of 2, and we close the bracket. Now all we need to do is just figure out or run the numbers in a calculator, and I would advise you to just calculate each term in the formula on its own. So on your calculator, just to try to have better chances of avoiding any calculator mistakes, just calculate the first part first, write it down here, and then go on to the next one, and so on. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. First part, I would say 0.44 after opening a bracket in my calculator minus 0.14. I'll close the bracket and square the whole bracket. Okay, I'm gonna get 0.09, multiply that by 0.3, and that's gonna be 0.027 plus, move on to the second term. For the second term, you can take a shortcut here because, as you can see, the holding period return for the second case is 0.14, which is 14%, and our mean is also 14%. So subtracting, we're going to get a 0, and a 0 to the power of 2 is also 0. So knowing that this part is going to be 0 multiplied by 0.4, that's also going to be 0. Okay, so you can take that shortcut and move on right away to the third term of our calculation. Okay, so I'm going to open a bracket, minus 0.16 minus 0.14, close my bracket, to the power of 2, Okay, that's also going to give me 0.09 multiplied by 0.3. That will be, again, 0.027. Okay, add these together. 0.027 plus 0.027. That's going to be 0.054. Okay. Now, remember that this is the variance. And the question did not really ask for the variance, it asked for the standard deviation. But we know from our knowledge in statistics that standard deviation, or sigma, is simply the square root of the variance. Okay, so knowing that variance equals this, we can derive our standard deviation by taking the square root of the variance. I'll just write down the rule for you here. Sigma equals the square root of the variance. Okay, so knowing that, we can calculate our standard deviation to be the square root of 0.054. I'll run the numbers on my calculator. Square root of 0.054. And that's going to be 0.23. Okay. Another 2, 3. And then transform this into a percentage format. So that's going to be 23.23%. Okay. Or actually round this up, because in the calculator it's 0.23237. So I'm going to round this up to 23.24. All right. And this is how you solve question number 5 from chapter 5. Hope you found this exercise useful. It's a straight application on the formulas that we have learned, the calculating the expected return or the mean of a scenario analysis, and calculating the standard deviation. As long as you know these two formulas, any similar question should be easy for you. Just run the numbers and then you will get to your answers. Okay, so the answer to the question, the mean of the scenario analysis as we calculated, is 14%, which represents the expected return, and the standard deviation, which is the second requirement, is 23.24%. Hope you enjoyed this exercise walkthrough, and I'll see you in the next exercise. Take care.